Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Wray, for your service to our country. And I want to personally thank you for the great work of the FBI in the case that you mentioned earlier, the synagogue in Colorado. Director Wray, I think it's important that the world knows that the people on this committee, certainly I, condemn white nationalism, white supremacy, Nazis, and I don't think anybody accepts the fact many of our relatives, my father fought in World War II to rid this planet from the scourge of Nazi Germany and Nazis generally, and it's upsetting to see any form of Nazi philosophy come back in this country or anywhere else. But there is, in the chairman's opening statement and in some other comments, there seems to be this link between white nationalists, white supremacists, Nazis, and hate crimes, as if only white supremacists commit hate crimes. I have seen a number of videos online recently, and it appears to me that hate crimes are much broader than that, and I want to get into some other questions, but if you could just let me know, is it true that the only hate crimes committed in this country are committed by white nationalists?
No, certainly. We've seen hate crimes committed by a variety of individuals.
Okay. And one of the concerns I have, and I agree with my friend Mr. Johnson from Louisiana's comments about the perception in the public about the even-handedness of law enforcement. I was in law enforcement for 25 years. I feel very strongly about the public perception of law enforcement. And I think that one of the challenges that we face, we have two very high-profile, one a one-day riot and one a series of riots last summer. And it appears to the public that those activities have been treated differently by the FBI and by law enforcement. Oftentimes, I think the riots involving Antifa and other groups over the summer in Portland and cities across the United States were handled by local law enforcement and not necessarily by the FBI. But because there appears to be a concerted and coordinated effort, it seems to me that the FBI would have a role in investigating those activities. And I just want to give you the opportunity to talk about the fact that you have 500, as you mentioned today, prosecutions of the January 6th events at the United States Capitol, and yet we don't see the leadership of Antifa or the money behind. There are news reports, for example, that the day after Kenosha, there were rioters there from Portland, from other cities that had converged at that location. It appears that those are coordinated efforts, and it involves, I don't know how you'd put it any other way, but organized crime. Could you please comment and tell the American people how seriously the FBI takes those types of domestic terror activities, and the fact that there really is no distinction, or there is a distinction between the FBI's efforts in one area and the other?
So first, to be clear, the FBI has one standard for both, right, which is based on the law, based on the evidence available, based on our effort to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution. I can certainly understand, though, why people might formulate an impression, and part of that has to do with the fact that in a lot of the hundreds of investigations we've been conducting related to activity over the course of the summer, in some cases the most readily provable offense is a state or local charge rather than the availability of a ready-made federal charge. And to some extent what you're seeing related to January 6th is that because a lot of the activity that was engaged in fairly straightforwardly implicates federal crimes, namely breaching federal property, going inside the Capitol, interfering with Congress, et cetera, it's easier to bring federal charges in that attack than it was over the summer. So a lot of those state and local prosecutions that you're referring to from over the summer have had our Joint Terrorism Task Forces.
I don't mean to interrupt you.
Working closely with our
Ray,
state
I've
local
got 5
partners,
seconds
yeah.
left, but I just want to mention there were attacks on federal facilities and cities across the United States.
Yes, and so that's the other piece of it, right? We have lots of investigations, lots of federal investigations. Like I mentioned, I think in my opening remarks, I think essentially all of our 56 field offices have been investigating activity there, and we are looking for things that are, of course, harder to drill into, but we're looking for things like funding, like logistics, like coordination. And so a lot of these gets down to questions of how readily available is the evidence, how clear is the federal jurisdiction. But when we have charges that we can bring federally, we're all in. We're all in. I mean, you know, some of these are offenses over the summer where people have brought, you know, thrown Molotov cocktails. In some cases, we were able to bring federal charges related to that. In some cases, there's an assault on a federal officer, and we're able to bring assault on federal officer charges. So we're looking for those types of offenses, but we're also looking at the kind of the more systematic type of issue. Again, funding, logistics, coordination, all that stuff. And a lot of this boils down to the less glamorous spade work that you would recognize from the investigative activity. Sometimes the evidence is readily available, sometimes it's harder to get at. But we're absolutely, we have one standard. I don't care whether you're upset at our criminal justice system or upset at our election system. Violence, assault on federal law enforcement, destruction of property is not the way to do it. That's our position.
The gentleman's time has expired.